Here he is, rink-wide Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, fresh off covering a 5-3 win against the Florida Panthers Saturday night alongside Chris Faber, who made his rink-wide debut. Jeff, good Monday to you. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. And it was, we had a lot to talk about, obviously, on Saturday night. And, I think I don't want to oversell it, but when you see what's happening around the Canucks in the early going here in the Pacific Division, if they lose that game in Florida, and for a long chunk of the third period, it felt like it was getting away from them. Mm-hmm. They drop below 500. They lose 3 in a row. All of a sudden, they have to roll into Nashville at the end of the trip and try and salvage the road trip. And we've seen in years gone by, you fall below 500, and it is just such a tough climb. And so, again, I don't want to make more than game number 5 of the season, but I just think the optics were there for the Vancouver Canucks when they were bending big time in that third period. And for Kuzmenko to respond a minute and 2 seconds after Sam Reinhart ties the game, that turns out to be the winner, and Brock Besser into an empty net. So all things considered, not a perfect performance. I'm not sure the third opening night was pretty close, but other than that, there's still things to work on. But it was pretty damn important, I think, for the Canucks to get out of Sunrise with 2 points.
I'm 100% with you. I was sitting there watching it in the third period, thinking to myself, and we use a phrase around here, games change everything. 2 and 3. Oh, we have to contemplate now another shitty October. And yet, Jeff, I saw your tweet yesterday, and I've been observing it myself night to night, checking box scores. Incidentally, isn't it great to check box scores? That's one of my favorite things upon a new season is looking at the box scores, looking at who's playing, who's scoring, all that. Anyways, checking the box scores, and you tweeted about it. 4 wins from the 17 teams directly above them in the West last year. Calgary.
No. Well, 4 wins from the 17 games that those 3 teams have played. Yeah.
Calgary, Edmonton, Seattle. 2-3-1 for the Flames. They lose last night. Edmonton 1-3-1. Now McDavid's hurt, and who knows? He may not even play against the Canucks on November 6th. And Seattle 1-4-1. They've already lost Brandon Tanev, and now Burakovsky going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. The optimist would look at that, Jeff, and say some things are falling in place here for the Vancouver.
At the very least, it's a head start, right? It doesn't mean anything, for over the course of the next month. But if you said, hey, the Canucks will get spotted a 5-point lead on Team X, you'd probably take it. And they're getting spotted a lead right now.
Well, and I think you just have to go back to last year and ask the Canucks, how tough is it to overcome a really difficult start? It's a slog. And to think, Seattle finished with 100 points last year, guys. Just do the math right now. That's 18 games over 500. Well, if you slip 3 games below 500, now you've got to play 21 games over 500 to get to that 100-point mark, and yet you've burned off a handful of games. So, again, I'm not sure that a lot of people thought Seattle would be a 100-point team, and maybe we could have expected a little bit of a step back, but they can't score goals. As you point out, Matt, a couple of key injuries already, and now this McDavid situation in Edmonton, they're already up in arms with 1 win in 5 games, and now 97's out for at least a week, and maybe more. The Oilers are here on November the 6th, and that's their second and final visit to Vancouver. So that's 2 weeks from today. We'll see if he's patched up and ready to go. But, what kind of impact is that going to have? I suppose maybe it forces some other guys that are off to slow starts there to step up in McDavid's absence. Whatever the case, the Canucks are holding their own at 3-2, and some of those teams around them absolutely scuffling out of the starting blocks. So whether it's just the Canucks record in a vacuum or what's happening in the division, certainly a more competitive start for the Vancouver Canucks in relation to the playoff pack than at this time a year ago.
If anybody flinched on Phil DiGiuseppe on the second line, I wonder what they're thinking now, because he continues to perform, and it's not like it's an unsustainable act that he's doing. He's not dangling around guys. He's just doing what they were hoping he would do, which is kind of meat and potatoes work to open up space and provide loose pucks for the other 2 guys. And it's just working, Jeff. Phil DiGiuseppe looks like he's going to be a Vancouver Canuck.
Well, and as long as Phil Kessel's out of the league, can we now call him Phil the Thrill? Because I've only scratched the surface, guys, on this NHL Edge, the player stat tracking that has now been released. But Phil DiGiuseppe has reached the highest speed of any Vancouver Canuck at any point this season in a game in Philadelphia where it didn't feel like anybody was skating particularly quickly. But Phil DiGiuseppe, tenths of a percentage point ahead of Sam Lafferty, who we do know has some speed to burn. But Giuseppe used his speed to get in on the forecheck, as you said, and that was a huge, obviously, it leads to the winning goal, but just the response that the Canucks need, even if they don't score there, it was a good response shift, but get in, peel the puck off the boards, get it to Kuzmenko, and Andrei Kuzmenko finished what was a really strong night for him, even to that point. But look, I was among the doubters. Count me. I'll put my hand up right now. I just didn't think on a good team that Phil Giuseppe had a role in the top six, but he is certainly playing to his strengths. We know the coach absolutely loves the player, but also what the player represents and all the board battles and the wall work, and just keep it easy, eliminate the mistakes and play that north-south game. And I think he can continue to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I want to dig into the player stat tracking a little bit further, but I thought it was fascinating. He would have been down my list, quite frankly, if I had to guess who had reached peak speed among Vancouver Canucks to this point in the season. But Phil Giuseppe at 22.5 miles an hour racing through the neutral zone in that game against the Flyers.
It's the perfect compliment to the other two players. So we know Besser's not going to go in on the forecheck and be that guy who digs the puck out. Miller can do it, but I think you'd prefer him being the second
shooter, yes,
right?
Exactly,
the second, and then in terms of speed, he's got enough of it that he's able to compensate for Besser on the other flank, and that line is quick enough. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, he's been a marvelous addition to what they're doing under Rick Tocchet this season. We talked on Friday, Jeff, we were starting to get a little bit worried about some of those forwards and the production or lack thereof. What did you make of Kuzmenko on the weekend, who obviously gets the game-winning goal? And with Ilya Mikheyev making his debut, give me your assessment of that line going forward.
Yeah, and look, Rick Tocchet talked about it after the game, and I would agree. Easily his best game. The bar was pretty low through the first four, but the goal is the winner, so that kind of steals all the shine. But how about the spinning backhand pass onto the tape of Elias Pettersson? And, when Kuzmenko arrived here in Vancouver, we were told, this guy's got incredible playmaking chops. But, we saw all those goals, the 39 goals last year, and kind of got drunk on that. But there was some playmaking there. But beyond that, guys, he also draws the penalty that leads to the Carson Soucy goal, standing his ground in front of the net. Oliver Ekman-Larsson has to put his stick on Kuzmenko. And so it's a goal. It's an assist. It's drawing a penalty by spending time in the offensive zone. And those were some of the things that didn't happen in Tampa. Even though he spent most of his night in the offensive end, there was no tangible takeaway. He was able to convert the zone time into good things happening for him in the hockey club on Saturday. And I do wonder if there's a direct correlation to getting his buddy Mikheyev back and just kind of having that extra hop in his step, because whatever the case, and look, Mikheyev kind of eased into it, 13 minutes of ice time, almost all at even strength. And I think that's the way you want to work a guy back after 9 months off and knee surgery. But it kind of felt like maybe Mikheyev did get an assist, but maybe his biggest assist on the night was just breathing a little bit of life into Andrei Kuzmenko, because they were good and he was good. And, now he can't go back into hiding. That's the thing. He's got to follow that up with another performance like that on Tuesday night in Nashville.
And I'll never understand why sometimes that does happen. You're right, guys. Just go back but when okay, all I have to do is that, and then I get that as a return. You'd think you'd just go out and do it every single time. And I've got some hope that Kuzmenko has got that awareness of what is required, and every game's going to roll out a little bit differently, some more physical than others. But hey, I suspect in a game versus the Nashville Predators, I mean, that is not the best version of the Nashville Predators that we have seen. The opportunity is there now for the Vancouver Canucks to finish this road trip strong, start this next 5-game set. We know coaches like to win those 5-game sets. Start it with a win. And again, now you've tucked in 5 road games under your belt if they can win against the Nashville Predators. And you've got the home schedule laid out before you. My goodness, this is a very different outlook for the Vancouver Canucks than last year, especially if they can get this Preds win.
Yeah, and they have a chance now to go into Nashville, rested, full team day off here on Monday, and they get to throw the race at the Nashville Predators. And I think that was absolutely the right call on Saturday. Casey DeSmith, I thought it was a little tidier than the game in Edmonton. There's still some moments there, but maybe that's who he is. I'm not going to sit here and say I've got the full book on Casey DeSmith, but the guy's 2-0 and has started 2 of the first 5 games. And I was one of those guys that thought they were going to lean on Demko, ride him hard early without the back-to-backs, but Now you've got a conference opponent. Not that the Florida game was a throwaway, but the Nashville game, Nashville's probably a team that you're going to be battling with for much of the season. They finished just outside the playoffs last year as well. They lean on their goaltender, UC Saros, and obviously they've had changes there with Barry Trotz coming in and Andrew Brunette behind the bench. So maybe a different team. We'll see how it all plays out. But now you've got a rested and refreshed Thatcher Demko, and instead of this fear of overplaying your number one guy, you're getting quality starts, but more importantly, you're getting victories from Casey DeSmith. And so with back-to-backs at the end of this week when they get home, yeah, there's a pretty good chance now that Demko won't have to play both of those. It's like you could probably give him one of those nights off, go to DeSmith, feel pretty good about the way that he's going to perform, and take it from there. But that's for later in the week. Right now it's with Nashville. But all I know is that we used to say arrested Jacob Markstrom is a better Jacob Markstrom. And I think the same thing applies to any workhorse goaltender. And so that's really encouraging that they're above 500, that they haven't had to rely on Demko when he's been in there. He's been really good. And so has Casey DeSmith. So in that third period, DeSmith under siege. I know he gave up 2, but ultimately he didn't give up that third one. And that allowed the Canucks to go and, he gave up the third goal of the night, but not in that period. And ultimately the Canucks able to pull out a victory. So I like the way the coach and the coaching staff, because I would include Ian Clark in that discussion, I like the way they handled their goaltenders here through these first 5 games.
Should they healthy scratch Quinn Hughes? He was on the ice for a goal.
Yeah, that is concerning. That's a troubling trend because those first 4 games. Now, I mean, it's an incredible statistic, and credit Thomas Drance has been following that one and charting it along. And, you knew the longer it went that the more sort of steam that statistic was going to pick up. But that is remarkable that it took until the third period of the 5th game of the season for a guy that plays almost half of these games. So he was so good. We spent a lot of the post-game Rink White on Saturday. I know that the market has talked about him a lot. Rick Tocchet spent a bunch of his post-game remarks. Just his command of that game and beyond scoring a power play goal, which is rare for him, but 6 shots on goal, 10 shot attempts. And just, everybody's marveling at that keep in at the blue line and the things that guy does. And I've said this before, that within 2 feet of the blue line, I'm not sure I've ever seen a better player. His confidence, and it's such a high leverage part of the ice. If you make a mistake in that area, quite often other guys going the other way on a breakaway, but he's just so supremely confident in his skills and abilities. And so to keep plays alive. And there was a play in the second period, and it was pretty innocuous, but when he's on, he's just such a marvel to watch. And he went back to retrieve a puck in his own zone, turned to his right, turned to his left, shook a defender, and started up ice. And it looked so easy. But if it was easy, everybody in the league would do it. And it's just second nature to him because that's what he's always done. And he was just so on top of his game the other night. And it's fun to watch. And it's for all the talk around the league, or the lack of talk around the league, I think that talk has to pick up here. And I think that people in Vancouver ought to keep beating this drum that he is among the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. It is wild that he got painted with that brush of can't defend in the All-Canadian Division season with no fans in the stands, completely bizarre circumstances on a terrible team. He wasn't good, but neither was the team around him. And all he's done since then is improve. I mean, he's moved to the other end of the spectrum, and yet he is still seen through that lens and painted with that brush. And it's totally unfair because that's not the player he is. This is one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League, hands down.
Is he more disrespected league-wide than Miller or Paterson, Jeff?
I think so. I mean, Miller's 99 points, I think, changed the view of some, and then Paterson gets to 99 and adds on 3 more for good measure. I mean, anybody that's putting up 100 points. I think Elias Pettersson really kind of came into the conversation of the Selke possibilities and, sort of on the fringes of Hart conversations last year. So, yeah, I mean, it feels of those 3 that Quinn Hughes is the last guy to sort of get his just desserts around the National Hockey League. I still maintain, though, and I hope someday he gets his hands on a Norris Trophy, but he's in an era of Cale Makar and Adam Fox and Miro Heiskanen and Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power. I mean, this is truly the golden age of incredible young defensemen, and he could have 10 amazing seasons, but one of them may never be better than one of those guys that I just mentioned. And that's not a knock on Quinn Hughes at all. He should be in the Norris discussion. I just don't know if he's ever going to put together that one season that, allows everybody league-wide to sit there and say, hands down, this guy was the best defenseman in the National Hockey League this season.
Yeah, I think he's going to need team success as well as that fantastic year, Jeff.
But I do think that
we've long talked about
Erik
it.
Karlsson winning it last year has to open some doors in some way, doesn't it? Like if Erik Karlsson can win the Norris on a bad San Jose team by putting up 1,000,000 points, then people are at least open to the idea of a guy like Quinn Hughes doing the things that he does. But I agree with you. And
might take 1,000,000 points.
Quinn,
though, right?
Quinn would be the first to tell you, like, he damn well better see some team success, because it's sort of that same conversation around Elias Pettersson. Like, you can only go so long scuffling along here before frustration is going to set in. But he's off to a good start, and 3-2, the team's off to certainly a much better start than a year ago.
Yeah, Karlsson outscored every defenseman by 25 points last year.
Yeah.
So I think
that
was the separating factor. But I hear you, and I agree wholeheartedly with all of this. Jeff, tomorrow I'll be in with you on Rinkwide against Nashville, and we get the entirety of the league playing tomorrow, Jeff. A 6:15 start for us out of Nashville with all these games that are staggered as the NHL goes fully across the league and across your television
Red zone
and screens, right?
Frozen frenzy. Can you feel the excitement? And yeah, I mean, game starting at 3:00 Pacific time and going until an 8 p.m. Pacific time start down in Los Angeles, I think it is, or Vegas. It's been a weird road trip, guys. The Canucks started in Edmonton. That was the late game on Hockey Night in Canada with opening night for the Oilers. I looked, puck dropped at 8:18 local time for that game. Then they went to Philadelphia with the baseball playoffs. That game got bumped up, so that was a 6:00 weekday start, 3:00 here on the West Coast. Pretty standard down in Florida. But yeah, 6:15. I would imagine that the Canucks have never had a scheduled six. I mean, they just don't schedule on the quarter hours. So I'm all for the league trying to do some novel things. And so often on those Saturdays where you have 6 or 7 early games and they all are stacked at 4 Pacific, you flip around the dial between periods. You want to watch some other action? Why not? So, if it gets some eyeballs, I'm all for it. And yeah, 6:15 Pacific time, 8:15 local there in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, to make this happen, they've had to make some accommodations. It was 2 games yesterday. It's 1 game today. It's quiet. 1 game Wednesday, so they're going very quiet around Frozen Frenzy, but I look forward to Frozen Frenzy with you tomorrow. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, guys. Thank you.
This Sekeres Price clip brought to you by
Jason Mortgage.